I'll call this meeting to order. I'd like to welcome all the people that came out today, and we hope you enjoy this meeting tonight. I'm going to ask Councillor Cari for the opening.
Thank you. Today is Super Tuesday. It's a big day for Democrats and the Republicans in the United States. So you may ask, what is Super Tuesday and why is it called Super? Well, Super Tuesday is a very pivotal point in their very long campaign where 12 states and 1 U.S. territory hold their primaries and caucuses. It's a day that will determine who will go head-to-head to be the next president of the United States. Voter volatility is making tonight's results quite hard to predict. The American electorate is seemingly quite angry, and that anger is directed at the status quo. In the U.S., the division between the rich and the poor keeps growing, and there is a political system that gives enormous power to wealthy candidates and contributors. We in Canada have watched with incredulous fascination as Republican Donald Trump has gained increasing popularity. If he continues, his momentum will put him in a great position to thrive in the polls tonight. Cruz, Rubio, and Kasich desperately need victories to prove they are still in the game. On the Democrat side, Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders will fight for voter support, with Sanders having to gain enough to be a real contender. Just before I came, Sanders did win Vermont already. The U.S. appears deeply divided on major issues, perhaps more than it has ever been in the recent past. Trump supporters believe him most capable of handling issues like the economy, terrorism, and immigration, while Clinton is the top choice when it comes to health care, race relations, and foreign policy. The campaign game certainly has changed, especially in the media. Party systems have been shaken up by the advent of social media. All of us are capable now of recording or capturing any moment, no matter where we are. The open-ended nature of social media has allowed candidates like Donald Trump to capitalize on sites like Twitter to gain constant attention. For better or for worse, campaigns are instant and incessant. Tonight is an important milestone for America, and the stakes are huge. The outcome of tonight will affect the American people as well as us at home here. They are our neighbors, and what happens next door does affect us. Let us hope and pray clear heads prevail and America votes for a competent, strong, and honorable president. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Penner. It's very fitting. This is also in our political field where we also work. So I'd like somebody to make a motion to adopt the agenda. Mr. Swagstra, Councillor Swagstra, Councillor Susan Penner. Any comments or additions? Okay, call for the question. All in favor? All is carried. I'd like to have somebody make a motion to excuse Mayor Gertson. Councillor Siemens, Councillor Funk. All in favor? That is carried. Okay, I'd like to minutes of February 16th financial plan. Could somebody move that we adopt those minutes? Councillor Swagstra, Councillor Cari Penner, seconded. Any comments? All in favor? That is carried. And I'd like to have somebody move the minutes of the February 16th regular council meeting. A motion. Councillor Funk. Councillor Siemens. Any comments? Changes? All in favor? That's carried. There's no business arising from the minutes. I believe it is 7:35, so I'm going to go to number 7, public hearings, on the variance at V2 2016-02, 26 Quail Ridge Place. I'm going to close the council meeting, open the public hearing. Mr. Workton, can you introduce this, please?
Yes, Mr. Deputy Mayor. This is an application for Variance V-2016-02. Owners of the property and the applicants are Harold and Norma Hebert. Purpose of the variance application is to permit the construction of an accessory building in the RRS Rural Residential Service Zone with a size of 1,616 square feet, where a maximum of 900 square feet are permitted. An accessory building was present at this location as an existing non-conforming structure until destroyed by fire in December 2015. It is the applicant's intent to rebuild the structure on the original foundation. Notices as required under the Planning Act have been issued. There was one piece of correspondence that was received at time of the preparation of the agenda that is in Councillor's packages. There have been 4 additional pieces of correspondence that have been received subsequent to that. Those were placed in council members' bins, and they should have access to that information. The application in question is also somewhat unique in that the zoning bylaw that was in force at time of construction was in 2004. There have been 2 successive amendments to the City of Steinbach zoning bylaw since that date, and the purpose or the reasoning for the variance requirement is that a building or an accessory structure of this size was previously permitted under zoning bylaw 1400. However, due to amendments that have been made with subsequent revisions and in current zoning bylaw 2055, the maximum square footage of an accessory building is limited to 900 square feet. Based on the review that was done by administration and the fact that the proposal is to rebuild the structure on the previously existing foundation, the recommendation from administration is that council, subject to any new information, approve the application.
Thank you, Mr. Workentine. Is the applicant here or represented? Do you wish to speak?
I do. For the record, it's Marcel Jordan appearing on behalf of the applicants. The applicants had hoped to be here, but in fact are away on a planned vacation down south. As Mr. Workington has indicated, this is an application for a variance to permit the construction of a garage, let's call it a garage, of 1,616 square feet. The exact same garage that was destroyed by fire, the exact same garage that was legally built in 2004, as Mr. Workington has indicated. As you may or may not know, approximately 12 years ago, when the Heberts built their home, they also had constructed the detached garage of 1,616 square feet. The garage is used by the Heberts to store the usual things that one would expect in their garage, but it's also used to store the 2 collector cars that the Heberts own. These are vintage sports cars, which are, I understand, Mr. and Mrs. Hebert's pride and joy. Mr. Hebert's hobby is working on these cars. These cars are always kept in the detached garage. The garage was originally built to allow Mr. Hebert space to house the collector cars which he owns, and to have adequate space to work on those cars, and also to store the usual things that you would expect to be stored in a garage, like riding lawnmower and the like. At the time Mr. Hebert was changing the dash in his collector car to an electronic dash is when, unfortunately, a fire ignited in the car and the garage was damaged beyond repair. That is, the building itself was damaged beyond repair, but the foundation itself, which, as you can appreciate, is one of the most expensive components to the building, was not. The foundation has been tested, and it has been determined that it is perfectly intact and was not adversely affected by the fire. The floor in the garage has in-floor heat. In-floor heat is installed as part of the floor at the time that the concrete floor is poured. So Mr. Hebert was very concerned that the in-floor heat may have been adversely affected, and that as a result he may not be able to have in-floor heat, and if that was the case, of course, that would change the entire heating system that would have to be installed in the new construction. The in-floor heat was tested and was found to be 100%. So not only is the foundation 100%, also the in-floor heat is 100%. It is a one-zone all-heat system. So for those of you who understand how in-floor heat works in concrete, basically it's pipes that are put through, and it's antifreeze, same as in a radiator. It's basically a glorified large radiator, and the heat is pumped through those lines, and the heat rises up from the concrete. You always have then nice warm concrete to work on, obviously that's something that Mr. Hebert appreciates. I can tell you personally that I have it in my shop, for which I needed a variance a number of years ago, which was granted by council. The practical problem is this, is that if in fact a variance wasn't granted today, that the in-floor heat system cannot be used because it's a one-zone in-floor heat system, so you can't have 900 feet inside the building, okay, and the other 716 feet outside the building. So of course that causes a practical problem. So what the Heberts are asking for is to be able to build exactly the same accessory building that was permitted back in 2014, as Mr. Workington has indicated, that they built, okay? Build it exactly the same, on the same foundation, to use the same in-floor heat system, all of which, of course, practically makes total sense. The reason we're here, of course, is that there's been a change in the zoning, which now has a maximum of 900 square feet for an accessory building, in the absence, of course, of a variation order, which we're asking for, clearly. There are, I understand, 4 letters of objection. I wasn't clear from Mr. Workington's comments whether there was 4 or 5, but I understand that there are to be 4, and I'd like to go through those if I can. The first letter of objection, you may have had an opportunity to review it, is from 10 and Shirley Nicotin at 30 Jefferson Street. Their property, as you can appreciate, doesn't back onto the Heberts' property, but is in fact across the street on Jefferson. So where you see lot 26 up on the screen, directly to the left of 26 is the Kaler property, and we'll talk about that. They have filed an objection. Directly to the left of that is the Demeray property, and we'll talk about that objection in a minute. And then across the street is the Nicotin property. I've had a chance to review the letter, as well, members of council will have as well, and it is clear from reviewing the letter that the Nicotins believe that the Heberts are applying for an increase in the size of the former garage. They don't understand that what was there was 1,616 square feet. They believe, it appears, that what was there was 900, and they're applying to increase it to 1,616. The Nicotins write in their objection letter, our question is, why does Mr. Hebert need to have a structure of 1,616 square feet when 900 square feet were adequate before? Like I've indicated, it appears that they were not aware that exactly the same footprint on the existing foundation, which is the thickened edge slab, which I referred to earlier with the in-floor heat, is what the Heberts intend to build. It is also worthy to note that the Nicotins purchased their property at 30 Jefferson in July of 2012. So the Heberts' detached garage was already there for a number of years. Mr. Workington indicated it was constructed in 2004, but was there for 8 years at the time. The second objection letter is from Mr. and Mrs. Demeray at 29 Jefferson. They have indicated where their property is, and for all intents and purposes, between their property and the Heberts' property is the Kaler property. There's a suggestion that Mr. Hebert is carrying on a business. Those aren't the facts here. The facts are that he works on his collector cars. That is his hobby. We do our hobbies at home, clearly. That's exactly what he does. Secondly, there's an issue with respect to noise, whether it's woodworking or working on your cars. Neighbors can be loud from time to time. It's permitted. We have a noise bylaw to address those issues. And if in fact there's an issue, then the Demarays have access, of course, to the noise bylaw to address any contravention of the noise bylaw. I'm not sure that there's a suggestion that they have. As well, I'm not sure that the objection from the Demarays takes into consideration that the proposed building is exactly the same size as the old building. And I say that again because council should know that the Demarays moved in to their property, they bought their property in 2012, 8 years after the Heberts had constructed their garage. The garage was there. Okay, they're buying their house, they can see the garage, of course they know the lay of the land. The third objection is from Rod and Sandy Kaler. Of course, this is the next door neighbor, and obviously this objection has to be given it appropriate weight because they are exactly right next door. Mr. and Mrs. Kaler in their objection right, we are concerned first of all about the precedent of building such a large shop in our neighborhood. I'm not sure if Mr. and Mrs. Kaler are here, and if they are, they'll be able to speak to this. But the reason I ask that, if whether they're here or not, is because that statement seems to suggest that they too don't appreciate that it's exactly the same building that was there at the time, okay, of the loss, and exactly the same building that was there in 2010, 6 years before that, the Heberts constructed their garage. The Kalers come, they're right next door, they buy their property. The garage is clearly visible, the detached garage is clearly visible. Okay, so they know what they're buying. So when I read that, I questioned whether or not they appreciate that this is exactly the same building. Furthermore, it would seem to me that whether the garage is 900 square feet or 1,616 square feet, the same activity will be carried on by Mr. Hebert in that garage, regardless of what the size is. And so that if there's an issue with respect to the noise because he's working on his car, it's not going to change. The only thing that's going to change is that Mr. and Mrs. Hebert wouldn't be able to store their cars, keep their cars at home, their collector cars, which as I've indicated are their pride and joy, because there probably wouldn't practically be enough room for them to keep them in the garage at home and allow Mr. Hebert to work on his cars as he required. In summary, as well, I should say that there is an additional objection from Kevin Martins, and I apologize if I don't know where Mr. Martins lives, but again, I'm going to suggest to council, and hopefully Mr. Martins is here to try and clarify this. He seems to be under the misunderstanding that this is a different building that was there. He writes, and I quote, "I fear that putting an outbuilding on that lot with the size of footprint being suggested would possibly harm surrounding property values for future resale." It's the same building that was there, I suspect, when Mr. Martin bought his property, same as when Mr. Demery bought his property, Mr. Kaler bought his property, and the Nicotins bought their property. Nothing's going to change in property values. We're just going to put things back to the status quo. In summary, then, the Heberts want to build exactly the same building on the same footprint that was destroyed by the unfortunate fire. The existing foundation and concrete floor were not affected by the fire, so there will be a significant cost savings to the Heberts if they are able to rebuild on the same foundation and use the same floor. If the footprint of the building is changed to 900 square feet, the Heberts would not be able to have in-floor heat in that building without demolishing and rebuilding the foundation and floor. Reducing the size of the garage from 1,616 to 900 square feet does not address any of the concerns which the objectors have raised. And all of the objectors purchased their properties long after the detached garage was built. I don't know about Mr. Martin's, because I didn't have an opportunity to search his title, but I can tell you that all the others, in fact, bought their properties knowing there was an accessory building of 1616. In light of that background, it is our submission that the appropriate order from council is to grant a variation order in this exceptional case. Those are my comments, subject to any questions that you may have.
Does anybody have any questions of council here? Not at this time. Okay, you're going to be around, maybe we'll have some questions.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Okay, is there anybody that wishes to object to this file?
Yes. Yeah.
Is anybody willing to? Okay, you want to take the podium, state your name and address, because it's recorded. So.
Certainly. My name is Lorna Kern. I reside directly behind the Heberts at 10 Creekside Drive. I have no objection whatsoever in regards to the building and the size that we've had in the past. 1616, I have no objection to that at all. I think my only objection is being directly behind the building, knowing that Mr. Hebert has done commercial work out of the building. We get fumes from paint, from the way it was vented directly towards our back property to the north, and there's debris about. There are like hoods of cars and rims and tires that are put in the back of the garage that we see. We have tried with some trees and shrubbery to take away from that, put a backyard fountain and things, but still we see debris in the yard. So if there is an intent of Mr. Hebert to continue with commercial work out of the garage, I again have no issue with the construction of the garage. I have issue with the purpose of the garage, and it's been implied that they keep both their vintage cars. They do, yes, but I know in this certain case, Mrs. Hebert's car was not in the garage, and Mr. Hebert was working on a client's car at the time. Mrs. Hebert had indicated that there was a gas explosion. So when I had witnessed the flames erupt, it was very startling. So with knowing that there's paints, fumes, there's flammables, it's very startling. And to see the explosion, I would rather not see that again. And it has happened, and I would hope it wouldn't happen again. So again, I have no issue whatsoever with reconstruction. It's the use. And if Mr. Hebert does plan on staying in a commercial aspect, I would like to see that there is a petition, or if there is something before City Council to change from residential to a commercial application in a residential area. That I would disagree to. But construction, by all means, certainly. Yeah. You're welcome.
Anybody else wish to object to this file or comment on this file? Please take the podium and state your name and address.
My name is Morris Demery. I live at 29 Jefferson Street, which is immediately to the left of number 26 Quail Ridge. We're about 23 feet away, actually. The picture doesn't show it accurately. Mr. Jodwin comments that as local purchases made after this building went up, well, first of all, there's approximately 25 to 30 foot wide bush between our properties and that property. So we purchased our property in June. There's no way we would see this building. Mr. Jordan also mentioned that just by seeing a building, it would be a little bit like seeing you, and automatically I know exactly who you are. And I do know you, but that's not possible. Time goes on and situations develop, and we hear noises and grinding and sanding going on. And we understand that. I do a little bit of work myself. But when it is ongoing, and in the summertime, I mentioned in my letter that the building, the entire front of the building faces away from the Hebert home onto the neighborhood. He has two overhead doors that are wide open. He grinds and works away, and it's got to be more than just his own work. This is not a storage building. There's every evidence, talking with the neighbors, that there's activity going way beyond the storage here. In the summer, we would like to enjoy our backyard as you would. Enjoy the picnics, enjoy the hot tubs, enjoy our children, enjoy our friends. We just had a big family gathering, 85 people. I come from a big family. Mr. Hebert has been grinding away with the doors wide open, facing into the neighborhood. This is unacceptable. And to think that we would notice this and buying it in June with this forest, well, I call it forest, it's 30, 40-foot high trees with underbrush and grass. We cannot see this happening, and nobody knows until they witness it. Also, we are very concerned about the extreme fire hazard. The night of the fire, it was an explosion. This thing was out of control. Fire trucks could not get to it because there's no immediate access for the fire truck. There's no back lane. There's no immediate access to fire hydrants. Therefore, the fire trucks have to haul water in. This is an area that cannot have any type of commercial activity. Even residential activity should be restricted because, and we know we can't do that, but because we don't have fire hydrants. So here we are standing outside in the cold in December, watching this fire, and I submitted some pictures. This is a fireball. The firemen are yelling for more water. There is no water. I'm sorry if I get a little emotional about it. We have property and children to protect here. The fire is out of control. And finally, they do contain the fire, and it's extinguished. We have only one resource left now, is prevention. Please do not leave us standing out there with a little garden hose, frozen. We cannot fight this fire. I have spoken to the fire chief and some firemen who said we are limited to what we can do. Our only access here is prevention. Mr. Joseph mentioned that there is floor heat, and therefore we have to build 60. There's got to be other ways. Otherwise, what is the purpose of your bylaw? If somebody comes up with a little excuse that, well, we can't do this, can't do that, what's the purpose of the bylaw, which was amended twice? There's got to be a reason, I think. And in our area, it's a perfect reason to restrict it to 900 square feet or less. So I appeal to the Honourable Council to really consider this if this was your backyard. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Demery. Is there anybody else that would like to speak to this file?
My name is Gary Kern. I live directly behind the address. I know Harold himself has talked to me directly and said that he has quit his job driving delivery truck in Winnipeg and is going into commercial work and needs to create jobs out of his job garage to pay for his shop. He has also acquired, that came to me and asked that, oh, would you like to have me do your other car? And I did not. I have my car being done at commercial places. So I just want to say, I know he is doing commercial work out there. I have no objections to them building the garage again, but I do not want to see commercial work going out of there. As my wife said earlier, we see the hoods, we see the car tires, we see the junk sitting there. I don't like putting up with fumes at least twice a month for gas or paint fumes being blown right at our yard. That's all I'd like to make. Okay?
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to this? For or against? Anyone else would like to speak to this? Does anyone else wish to speak to this? Mr. Dodo, would you like to last kick at it?
Yeah, I can't. My only comment would be this, and that is there are bylaws in place to deal with situations where people carry on a business at the residence that's not permitted. So there are remedies available for the neighbors if in fact that is occurring. I'm not privy to any of that, clearly. But it seems to me that from what I've heard, that they're not objecting to the size, but perhaps the activity that's in there. Today, the issue before council is the size of the building. That would be my only comment.
Does anybody have any questions of the administration? Okay, Mr. Siemens?
Through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, to administration. Is there any outstanding complaints on file regarding noise or activity at this location?
Based on our review of any complaints that have been received, there are none that have been registered against this property.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. This is also for administration. So if the building was to be reconstructed and there turned out that there were concerns about commercial activity, what remedies do people have and does the city have to make sure that that does not happen?
Just for council's information, there is a few sections under the City of Steinbach zoning bylaw that pertain to home-based businesses. There are a number of provisions. They're too many, too numerous to quote all of them here. But there are requirements that if there is commercial activity being conducted out of a residential property, subject to what is permitted within the zoning bylaw, there is the requirement to acquire a home-based business license, which is also subject to council's approval. And in addition to the City of Steinbach zoning bylaw, with respect to other matters pertaining to noise or other nuisances, the City of Steinbach does have bylaws that regulate those items.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. So 2 questions, just to follow up. The first is, and I think I know the answer to this, but I want to make sure I confirm. The first is, does this property have a home-based business license? I'm assuming not. That there is no license that's currently a commercial license. It's
the answer to that I cannot confirm. That's not something that has been verified.
Okay. Then the second question is, just considering the types of home-based businesses that are allowed, is this type of activity, if it's happening where cars are being repaired there and such, would that be something that is currently permitted as a home-based business in terms of having car repairs? Would that, is that something that is allowed under current bylaws?
If you can just give me one moment, I'll quickly review this particular section. Section 79.1 of City of Steinbach zoning bylaw does include a listing as to some home-based businesses that are prohibited in all zoning districts. The most pertinent comment is section 79.1F, which states on-site painting, body repairs, or other repair of automobiles, trucks, boats, trailers, or other motorized vehicles is prohibited.
One follow-up. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. So I just want to be absolutely clear. So if we were to allow the reconstruction of this facility, it is explicitly prohibited in city bylaws that there would be any of those things that you just listed taking place at this property.
Insofar as a home-based business?
Yes. Well, it's in terms of, that's the only thing this could operate as a home. It's not a commercial property.
That's correct. However, there is provision that owners, if it is hobby or activities related to their own personal vehicles or other vehicles, that would be permitted as a residential use.
But commercial activity would be
correct.
Prohibited. So doing it for others. Okay.
Any other questions, Council? No? Okay, then I'm going to close the public hearing. I'm going to open the council meeting. How would you like to proceed? Councillor Stevens?
Motion to approve and grant reconstruction of this building.
Councillor Stevens, a seconder for that? Councillor Susan Penner? Okay, Councillor Stevens?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I think, as stated earlier, there's 2 issues here. There's the size of the building and the activity, and most people agree that we should be allowed to reconstruct the building because it was there. And it's grandfathered. The only reason we are here is because there was an unfortunate event, and there was a fire that took place and burnt down the building. So now we're faced with the zoning. We've made 2 zoning variations since then, or changed the zoning bylaws twice since for a variety of different reasons. And but now we're faced with the discussion whether we should be allowed to rebuild a building that is larger than the 900 square feet that are allowed under the current zoning. So I think it is appropriate for City Council to allow them to reconstruct the building on the existing foundation. The foundation is still in good shape, along with the floor heap as indicated. The building won't be any larger or high. There won't be any higher, have more height to it. Under the reconstruction, it will be exactly the same building. So the issue, and there are bylaws in place as indicated regarding a home-based business, regarding hobbies, regarding storage. So I think there are, through the complaint process to the City of Steinbach, that can be managed through the bylaws appropriately. So I think it is in our best interest to allow for them to rebuild the building that they lost due to a tragic fire.
Yeah, I concur with what Councillor Seaman said in terms of there being 2 separate issues here. The one other issue that I heard was that the design of the building with the doors facing away from the homeowners into the neighborhood is something that would be nice if maybe the homeowners would consider looking at. So when there is noise and disturbance and ventilation, that maybe it would face towards them and not the neighborhood.
Thank you, Councillor Penner. Anybody else want to speak to this? Councillor Cari Penner.
Yes, I'll also concur with Councillor Seaman's motion. As well, I would like to also acknowledge that the neighborhood did have a very unfortunate incident with this fire, and it's frightening and it's disturbing. I understand that. I hope that they will also feel that they are empowered. If there's an issue with too much activity going on that upsets the neighborhood, that they can come to City Hall and express their concerns and have them dealt with.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Funk.
Thank you. I too will support the motion, but I also agree and recognize there are 2 issues here, one being the size and one being the activity. And in this case, the applicant should be allowed to build the same size building on that site. But I also feel for the neighborhood who come home and they're coming to rest after work and enjoy their backyard. And if the noise is excessive and if there is commercial activity going on, we have a bylaw that will protect it. And if you do your diligence and bring it to our acknowledgement, then we can deal with that at that time. But at this time, the issue is, are we going to allow him to build exactly what he had? And we will.
Councillor Funk. Okay, no other comments? Okay, Council, I sympathize with the Heberts. First of all, nobody wants to be victim to a fire. And secondly, once you've, as was mentioned, when you got the floor heat in there, it is very, very difficult to go and build something a different size than what you've had. And I also sympathize with the neighbors that have had issues, and the only thing I question is why they didn't come out earlier and complain about that. It would have been nice, because if it was, something that there had been regular complaints, this would have been a venue where it could be dealt with. With regards to the commercial activity, that is something that I think that we need to really keep an eye on enforcement, because I don't think that other shops would be look too kindly on people competing with them out of their home-based businesses. So I believe I would have no difficulty with supporting this motion either. So I'll call for the question. All those in favor? That's carried. Okay. There is no delegation and no reports of recommendation of the city manager. So then we'll go to administration, accounts payable. At the back of the book, could I have a motion, please? Councillor Cari Penner, seconded. Councillor Earl Funk. Any discussion? All in favor? That's carried. Excavator licenses on page 15. Can I have a motion, please? Councillor Funk, Councillor Swagstra seconds it. Any discussion? All in favor? That is carried. Remember to raise my hand too here.
Yes, you're abstaining.
I got reprimanded for that last time. Okay, is there any questions of council? None? Then we'll go to correspondence and petitions on page 28. There's a municipal curling event on March the 10th.
Deputy Mayor.
I have previous engagements, so I'm unable to attend. So would you go in my place?
Deputy Curler.
So I would love to actually, but I've never curled. So okay, and then we have a letter from Steinbach MCC regarding Performing Arts Center. Take that as information.
Sure.
And the Manitoba Municipal Government Recreational Feasibility Study Grant, we'll also take that as information on page 31. And we've got a letter of correspondence on page 32. And I'm going to ask Mr. Workington to just give us a little bit of background on this file.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, this letter is not the first with respect to this particular property, nor Mr. Fast's concerns with the drainage in the area. In general, the explanation that Mr. Fast provides explains a situation that has been in place for many years. Most of the private lots along Old Tom Road are low-lying and prone to water accumulation, especially on the western side. And water accumulation does happen. Many of the properties do have the original creek bed that is running across their properties. The existing culverts have been installed as required. Normal process, or I should say normal policy, with respect to significant drains such as this one is if there are any improvements that are initiated, it is due to developer prompt. And at this time, there is no immediate plans to conduct any development in that area. As far as the drain itself, it is a drain that is under provincial jurisdiction, and as such, the maintenance authority for the drain itself would be the province of Manitoba. And at this point, the existing drain is being maintained to a reasonable level, given the fact that there has been, again, no improvements or development occurring in the immediate area. And if council does have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them for you.
I have a question.
Councillor Funk?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just wondering if there's something we can do, or if to bring it towards the conservation district. If there's something they can help us with a provincial drain like that. If there's something they can do and advocate for us, that would be something you wouldn't mind bringing before them. Maybe you have already, I don't know. But because it is a provincial drain, I know they deal with that a lot often. It's private property, so they definitely like to use our crown lands for their work, but they might be able to do something with a provincial drain. So I'm wondering if that was something you'd like to take forward to them.
Well, if I may, I'll speak very briefly to that. St. Rat River Conservation District has been in dialogue with the golf course, and until we can deal with the water starting at the far end of the golf course, there's no point in dealing with it here. You have to be able to dispose of the water, whatever water it comes, and so it has to be in a controlled way. And so there is some dialogue happening, and I'm not at liberty to say much more than that at this time. And I don't know how much of that will correct, but it's a far bigger problem than just this corner here. There's hopefully we can start with that, you know, if you don't start with it downstream, it's very hard to deal with it at this level here. So that's, I think, all I can say at this point. But there is some talks. The engineers have actually been on the golf course in that area there, and so we have to just see whether we can get all parties in there to see whether we can get some support for that. So
That actually gives me a follow-up question.
Okay.
Has that been conveyed to Mr. Ray Fast? That we're working on it?
I'm not aware.
Upstream like
I'm
that?
not aware. This is probably something that
That might alleviate some of his concerns if he knows we're working on it. We're upstream for him.
Well, it's right now. It's just the dialogue stage, right?
Oh,
So
dialogue,
we can't really speak any more to that than that. But I think until the reason I mention this is because if we don't deal with it downstream, to just deal with it at this corner is not going to help us a lot. If we can deal with it downstream, I think it'll help this corner here a lot. So, okay, there is no other business, so I entertain a motion to adjourn. You have something?
Okay.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I just had a question to administration through you.
Okay.
That property, when the house was built, was that a damp area to begin with? Or is that just like relatively recently that area became?
Well, I'll try and explain it as best I can. You can't see the topography from the aerial photo that's up on the screen. However, just to give you context, Mr. Fast's property is right at the corner of the intersection of Lowen Boulevard and Old Tom Road. The general lie of that property is the high point is at Lowen Boulevard, and there's a general slope to the north, and the extreme rear corner of Mr. Fast's property does drop off dramatically in that that corner of that parcel generally was the part of the original creek bed. So it is unusually low at the back corner.
So just one more question. Just to
Councillor
clarify, you're saying this is nothing new. This is an existing problem from a long time.
I believe it exceeds.
Just to clarify.
I believe it exceeds my age.
Thank you.
Wow.
I'm
You walked into it. Sorry.
I'm sure there's a very valid reason why those lots back there are probably not have houses built on them yet, because they're probably that low, right? So, anyways, I'm going to entertain a motion to adjourn. Councillor Funk, Councillor Susan Penner, all in favor? Thank you very much.